Around October, I realized that I wasn't feeling quite myself and delayed the inevitable for several weeks before I took a pregnancy test and realized that I was pregnant with our son. And so overnight, our life completely shifted. And in hindsight, it's what kept us together. And thank God not to mention the fact that we absolutely adore our son. But it certainly was a big curveball.
In today's social media obsessed world, we all see the successes, the world record breaking, and the achievements of the people we look up to. But what we don't see is what goes on behind the scene. Hosted by power couple Dean and Alana Stott, this show is dedicated to asking difficult questions while discovering the support systems and people behind those we love and respect in media, business, athletics, and high-performance culture. Dean and Alana believe that through honest communication, teamwork, and mutual respect, that anything is possible.
Like, there's not a better partner I could choose who's equally as crazy as me, because we have a chip on our shoulder to prove people wrong, and to prove ourselves right.
I can go be the face of this. I can go do this, but I don't understand the back end of this. I have to learn business. I have to learn how this works.
Many couples in this dynamic are stuck and unable to move forward in an identity crisis.
Marcus's energy is so bad. I feel like I need to cleanse my house. Like it's suffocating. And then seeing him 24 hours later, he was as light as air. Yeah.
And we literally embraced, hugged. I stepped back and I said, this is exactly what the guys need.
When we can look behind the scene and learn from each other, we can finally move forward and transform into our fullest potential.
Marcus, Amber, thank you so much for joining us. For the viewers, they won't realize that actually the timing of when we're recording this, but it's Memorial Day weekend, so it's perfect timing because you are our first veteran on the show.
Nice.
So
wow.
Yeah. And we've had entrepreneurs in, but no, thank you so much for joining us. I know you guys are busy. It's been hard to get these diaries together. So thank you first from myself and Lana joining us. But we've discussed briefly before we started about the concept of behind the scene. And so really from ourselves, I know a bit about you, Marcus, and be interested in seeing who is actually behind the scene now, because I think now, Amber, as well, you're doing a lot now with the charity with vets, and so I think you're probably ahead.
I was behind the scene for 2 decades.
She was the scene.
Yeah.
She was the scene behind the scenes for a long time.
So that's probably where it's a good place to start. How did you guys meet?
We met when I was 17 years old, actually. My dad had recruited Marcus to play football for him in college and had taken another job. And shortly thereafter, I saw Marcus's photo in the paper and I thought, oh, he's really cute. And happened to just meet him by happenstance a few months later.
We met at a local establishment.
Yeah. Yeah. We met actually at a nightclub that my best friend at the time was at. She'd had too much to drink.
So she saw a picture of you and then she happened to meet you. Is there a bit
I think there was some work. There was some work being done.
No, there was no work. It was totally happenstance. I had seen your photo. And then fast forward a bit of time. And then I came to pick up Birgit and you were there. You were sitting there.
I had some friends on the football team, some of the big offensive linemen, huge offensive linemen that worked as bouncers up at this place. And we started talking unilaterally to these individuals. Like I would talk to him and then separately he would talk to Amber. And then they would kind of get back to each of us saying that, I think there's some mutual things going on between the two of you. So.
And you were 17.
Yes, that was June and July, and then I turned 18 in September. So I was only 17 for a very short period of time.
So Amber was still in high school, technically, while I was in college. So we were dating, probably not legal.
I was old for my age. I was old for my class. I could have been not in high school, but
and I was young for my class. So.
And how had you grown up to this point? And were you? What was your childhood like?
I grew up on a retired dairy farm in Southern Illinois. There's nothing going on there. It was a very wholesome upbringing. My entire family was there. I was raised as an only child. My mom was a single mom, and my grandparents played a huge role in my life. I really I'd been on a plane once before I met Marcus. I hadn't traveled outside of the state more than twice. I was pretty sheltered, but I also had like a bit of an edge where I was like, oh, yeah, he looks like a very good time.
He can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
So was your dad still around, or
he had taken another coaching job in Chicago. So this was same state, different part, but he was far enough away that I could date Marcus, yet close enough that he could drive down and literally break his neck. So, and he threatened to do that a time or two. But no, we were pretty inseparable from the very beginning. And as Marcus was finishing his time in college and deciding maybe he wanted to go into the military, which I can let you get into that. But I didn't think that we would be together. I was always very independent, I think, having been raised an only child. And I just thought this is a great parting point.
Yeah. And what career, did you have any career aspirations at that age? I know 17 is still quite young, and no one really knows what they want to do. But did you have any visions of what you wanted to do as an adult?
I knew that I wanted to be very independent. I thought I would probably be single in a city, either Chicago, LA, New York, somewhere. My dad had always said, as soon as you can, leave this place because there's nothing for you here. It was very rural and not a lot of opportunity. And so in my mind, I always knew as soon as I can, I'm out of here. In fact, I was supposed to go to college a few hours away from where I grew up. But when I met Marcus, I changed all of my plans to go where he was going. And
Amber was supposed to go to University of Illinois, which was in Champaign, bigger, kind of larger school. And I was at Southern Illinois University. So he started talking about going into the military, and I was just like, well, military is not for me. I grew up in a very patriotic family. I had 5 uncles in World War II, and 3 of them were killed. One was a prisoner of war. And so I grew up not really understanding too much about the military because we weren't really near a military base, but having so much respect for anyone who is willing to serve this nation. And at the same time, I thought, that is not the life that I want to live. I was just a very like gung-ho type kid, very entrepreneurial from the beginning of, I didn't really play dolls. I played like build a store, create a restaurant, make a library, things that were very complex. Write my papers, do my homework.
I did that too.
Some of it.
But I never thought that being a stay-at-home mom or a military wife was ever anything that I would want to do.
Yeah. And Marcus, you were at college, and was it sport that took you to college?
It was. I got hurt before my senior year of high school, and so that was supposed to be my big year to come out and play, and hopefully. I always wanted to play ball in the NFL or something. And so I was hurt this summer going into my senior year. I had 2 torn ligaments, and so it kind of ruined everything really in terms of like being a collegiate athlete. So I went to junior college for a year and a half. I went to one of the top junior colleges in the country to play football. And while I was there, I did pretty well. And her dad recruited me from New York, and I just wanted to get away at that time. So I grew up in Long Island. I was supposed to be probably born in Southern California. Between surf and swimming, and this was the lifestyle I always wanted to live. And I felt like one day I'd be out here. And so my thought was get away from New York and do something different. And so I had college offers from all across the country, but.
And not just in football, I was a multi-sport athlete.
Yeah, I played baseball, I wrestled, I swam. I did kind of everything.
Yeah.
But football was the thing. I was a quarterback, and
did you have siblings? Sorry.
No, just we were both only children.
Oh wow.
I have 2 half brothers. I consider them brothers, but we weren't raised together. So yeah.
And I have a half sister that I have actually never met. But so we consider ourselves only children. And we fight about a lot of things. But so her dad was a really good salesman and coach. And so I decided that Southern Illinois was the right choice.
So you wanted to get out of the country and go to the city, and you wanted to get out of the city and go to the country. So
exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So I was that kid from New York that showed up in the Midwest with baggy jeans and white sneakers and with a really strong New York attitude, New York accent.
Yeah.
And, I still said water, and it's pretty much gone away now, but.
And how is that with the rural areas? Is there from somebody who doesn't know anything about how the situation of it works, I imagine that do California and New York have an arrogance towards the
Midwest? Yeah,
I think absolutely.
Is it?
New York always thought we were the center of the universe and everything. But I think people are starting to realize now that there's other places out there. I mean, people are getting out of New York, right? They're moving to Florida, moving to Nashville, Texas. They're realizing that, we can do things now in other places. But there's strong arrogance that we were better than everybody.
Yeah.
I would say from the Midwestern perspective, there was no arrogance. Everyone was very friendly and loving. I would say so sheltered that I didn't realize that any of these types of things or prejudices existed. We thought that he was like everything. Like the whole town was like, ooh, Marcus Capone from New York. He was larger than life.
And did you have to fight off any other girls?
Always. Yeah. I'm not afraid to do that.
Still not afraid to do it.
What was the period? Your aspirations was to be professional sports.
Yes.
When did you realize that wasn't going to be a dream, and then you had to look at an alternative path?
Yeah. I think when you just realize that you're not as good as you'd like to be. Not that I ever. The thing is, I never thought I was good. And I still struggle with that. But I never had like big records, or was never all everything. And like, I think finally, sophomore, junior year, you start realizing that 3% of all Division I college players ever go on to the next level. And then when they get there, it's even, you wash out pretty quickly because of, the competition is so great, right? I'm sure it's just like in soccer or football, depending on where you're from and how you call it. So I would say, junior year, that, this is not going to be your the rest of your life. And you get scared. And I remember telling Amber, I said, man, all I've known was like ball. From 3 years old, I can remember I was on skis and in the pool, literally from my earliest childhood memories. And I remember saying, I think I was 21, saying, am I supposed to wear a suit and tie now, every day for the rest of my life? It really scared the crap out of me. And again, I didn't start looking into other things at that time. I just thought, okay, I guess this is it. I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to be a coach, maybe go work for, Amber's father or something. But again, that's all I knew. I joked with the guys I worked with in the military, especially in buds, where, guys were like turning wrenches and like hunting and fishing and doing all these things that I never really did. So this was all a new learning experience, once I went in the military.
Yeah.
But
I know. We do a lot in the mental health arena. It's hard for these. I know, like some of we'll call them soccer rather than football. The soccer teams in the UK, you get these young children in from the age of 8 in these soccer academies, and their dreams and aspirations are to play in the Premier League, and then they get to the age of 16 and they haven't made the cut. And then how damaging that is to them mentally, but they don't have a fallback. Yeah. So I know now that in the UK, they are giving them trades. They are giving them life experiences or alternative options. Because I imagine if that's all you've ever wanted to do from a young age, and then you've realized you don't make the cut, it's affecting a lot of them mentally. But I know the military is always a great fallback. There's a lot of guys and girls in the military who were potentially going to be professional sports people, but obviously didn't, and then just feel like they've left that sort of team camaraderie background. And where can they find that? Where can they still be physically active? How can they still push themselves? So I think the military is a great net to sort of catch those that do fall or who don't actually make it. I know my father was a professional soccer player, and he had it was called gristle on the knee. But back in the 60s, they just opened your leg up completely. Yeah. So that was the end of his professional football career. But he then went on to be the Army soccer player, manager, coach. He was what we would call a tracksuit soldier. He just spent his 22 years in the military wearing a tracksuit. So he'd found his net, that sort of caught him. So there is, and I can relate. I know a lot of my friends in the military were similar. They had great sporting careers and then obviously didn't make it professionally. So was that when you then decided it was the military for you at that point, or was there a period in between? Oh, here we go.
This is a funny story that we never spoke about until we actually started speaking a little bit like this. Actually, where was it that we actually talked about this?
I'm not sure, but I thought it was a documentary that Marcus watched, like something on Discovery Channel. I think there was one.
I probably hit it from you too, because I was so embarrassed of how I got interested in the SEAL teams.
Just say it.
Don't say Call of Duty now.
Have you ever seen G.I. Jane?
Yes. We love it, don't we?
So
the Demi Moore film where she becomes the first ever Navy SEAL woman.
Favorite,
yeah. So still embarrassed to talk about that, but many, I guess the guys that were 10 years before me in the SEAL teams, they watched the actual movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, which was awesome. Yeah. Which was really awesome. But
it's really not.
But it's so good. But yeah, I watched this show one night with my roommate who went on to, he was a 4-year starter, defensive back, and he went on to fly F-18s in the Marine Corps. And we were watching this movie that came on called G.I. Jane. They started talking about this mystical, special operations unit, and it was the best of the best. And I had no idea, had no military upbringing. My grandfather had a Purple Heart that we had hung. Oh, can you still hear me? There we go. Yeah, we had hung in the house. I never even understood what that meant. Yeah. My dad served. My dad and mom were kind of hippies. And, my dad served, I think, because it was just something to do at the time.
Well, there was also the draft. I don't know if he was drafted.
Yeah, but I'm not 100% sure. I should probably know that. But, anyway, I see this show on TV and they start talking about best of the best. And I just thought, wow, that I want to be best of the best, whatever that meant. And so really that just sparked some interest. And then maybe those documentaries came on. So I don't know if it was the documentaries first or that, but my memory was
G.I. Jane.
G.I. Jane.
G.I. Jane, that would make me want to join as well. But that was 98, was it? 99. So when did you watch that then?
Yeah, that was exactly. It was 99.
It would have been 99. He enlisted in 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, and I graduated in 2000. So it was right. It was about a year before graduation.
Really?
Yeah.
And from that point forward, it was anything and everything he could get his hands on. He was ferociously just attacking this idea of becoming a SEAL. And once he had decided, it was there was no turning back. He would read everything.
Did you guys talk about it before he said, yeah, I'm doing it? Or was it just...
He did come to me and say that. And I thought, well, that's not for me. I'm not graduating. He's graduating. Yeah. This is a great point to break up. And we'd been together for 2.5 years at that point. It would have been 3 years by the time he left. And it just seemed like the logical time to part ways. Yeah. It was well, will we stay apart? I don't know, probably. I couldn't see us getting back together, but we were totally amicable. We were going to finish out the semester and he was going to go to boot camp and then that would be it.
Yeah, it was a very one-sided conversation. I was doing. But again, you watch the movie and some documentaries and then I read ferociously every book I can find that was written about the SEAL, the SEAL teams and special operations. And I think every which one I read, because there wasn't a whole lot online at that time.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And there was obviously no 9/11, so it was all Vietnam era stuff that he was reading about. He read a lot of Rogue Warrior.
Oh yeah, you know,
Dick
a lot of
Marcinko.
all the Marcinko books, and then all the Vietnam books, and so I
Started training.
Well, then,
So can you do that? Can you go straight from like nothing to?
So in the American forces, you can join from a civilian and join the Navy SEALs straight away.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Well,
very-
there are just like some different rules around that. So then, of course, it's enlisted versus officer, right?
Yes, of
And
course.
so because I was in college, and this is how dumb I was. I didn't know the difference. I didn't even know there was a difference between. I didn't know there was an enlisted and then officer.
officers. Yeah.
And so I went down to the recruiting station, and they were all there. And I walked in, and the guy just happened to be a combat diver.
Okay.
So he kind of knew a little bit about the special operations industry, and he's like, "Hey, Marcus, what's going on?" I said, "Well, this is what I want to do." He's like, "Yeah. Everybody comes here and says this is what they want to do." He said, "Aren't you at the university?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm graduating in a year." He goes, "Well, you can be an officer." And I said, "Great. What's that?"
Yeah.
And he started, telling me a little bit about, well, if you have a college degree, that's what you do. You become an officer. If you don't have a college degree, then you go and enlisted. And I said, "Oh, okay, that's great. So what do I have to do?" He said, "Well, I can't take care of you here. You have to go up to St. Louis. That's where the officer, program is." So I wound up getting connected to the group, the officer, I don't know, called Officer Corps. I don't know. It's their recruiting unit. And started going down that path, and you have to apply to all the different officer designations. Like surface warfare, special warfare, which is the SEAL teams, flight, submarines, all these different intel. So you apply for everything. So I applied for everything, and when he came down to do the test for the only physical test he had to do is for special warfare.
Right.
I thought I was training hard, and again, I had no mentors. I had nothing. I was doing everything on my own, what I read out of a book. And so when I did the test, they said, "Oh, you have to have boots on to do the 1.5 mile run."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, I don't have boots." So I was a size 14. So I borrowed a friend's that were size 12.5. So I had on boots that were too small. I had to wear pants. It was all.
It sounds like you.
It was just all jacked up.
Yeah.
And so I start the run. I cramped the first quarter mile in. The push-ups, I guess I was doing what they call frog push-ups, where where your elbows are this way,
tucked in.
Yeah. And so that's all I knew. So I started knocking those out. He's like, "No, those don't count." So it just, the whole thing was shit. My physical fitness test was shit. And then of course, when it comes back, they're like, "Marcus, you've been accepted into every program except special warfare."
Oh, really?
And I'm like, "Well, that's not what I want to do. I want to be a SEAL." They're like, "Well, you can come in and you can do any of these other designations, except what you want to do." And I said, "Well, that's not what I want to do." Well, they said, "Well, you can 100% just not do any of these and go in enlisted." I'm like, "That's exactly what I want to do."
Oh, really?
And so all that work I put in for that, I just went back to the enlisted recruiter and signed up.
Sign up there. Yeah.
That was it.
Meanwhile,
Dun, dun, dun.
I was interested. When he was doing all this studying, did you do any studying? Did you look into it?
no,
yourself?
because as far as I knew, we were not going to be together, and I was fine with that. I don't remember when you decided to go into the Navy and how the timelines worked necessarily, but he was doing a lot of this, I think, over the summer. And then August came around, we went back to school. It was your last semester before your internship.
Mm-hmm.
We had decided to break up. My birthday was in September. Around October, I realized that I wasn't feeling quite myself and delayed the inevitable for several weeks before I took a pregnancy test and realized that I was pregnant with our son.
Wow.
And so overnight, our life completely shifted. And in hindsight, it's what kept us together. And thank God not to mention the fact that we absolutely adore our son. But it certainly was a big curveball.
Yeah. And obviously when you found out, is the pressure on, did that give you more determination to join the military?
Or did you ever consider not and do the 9 to 5?
I have a lot of friends who I say a lot of friends, a lot of guys come up to me and said, I was going to join the military, but then I met my wife, or she was pregnant. And I was like, so that's that T-junction in life. You could have either put the Navy SEALs on hold or go full force at it.
Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted him to change any of his plans.
Yeah, I didn't have any pressure. Amber didn't pressure me at all, and we probably wouldn't be sitting here today chatting, I'm sure. But no, there was no pressure. Again, I just think we were so young and dumb, and
just go with the flow.
Go with it, right?
Yeah.
I remember sending an email. I sent an email off to one of my best friends that I lifeguarded with. This guy was a stud, wrestler. I remember typing the email. I think he says he still has it. I was like, sit down. Here's what's happening. I'm graduating. I'm going in the military. I'm having a baby and I'm getting married. It was like all at one time, and
in one sentence.
Yeah, it was all. I just remember writing that from your computer upstairs in the it was the only access I had to a computer to Ashton. It was funny.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely obviously ended up working out, but there were so many days, weeks, months that it didn't seem like it would work out. And in fact, we spent a lot of time during my pregnancy not speaking because he was getting pressure from his parents. My parents had been in the same situation with me, actually. And so they had compassion because they'd been through it before. But then there was my dad, who was his coach, who was like, I will kill him. And he la la la. And that was stressful. But Marcus always.
So how old were you at this point then?
20.
Okay.
20. Marcus generally always does the right thing. It might be the 11th hour, but he came around, and
I let the ego kind of get in the way a little bit always, and then
it was scary. It was scary.
Yeah.
He was so excited about this next chapter, and this felt like this could potentially end or impact the next chapter. And there were friends of mine who were like, just end the pregnancy. And when you're in that situation, when you're not in the situation, you think like, oh, okay, well, let's, consider it. Or I would never do that. When you're in the situation, there's no way I could have done it. There's absolutely no way. And so I just thought, if I have to have and raise this baby by myself, then that's what I'll do.
And so this was pre 9/11. So, the thought of going to war, having a baby with a partner, going to war, I guess wouldn't be really in your mind.
No, I didn't really even know what the military was, let alone the SEAL teams or special operations. But I knew that, I wanted to be with Marcus and raise this baby together if possible. And so when he came back around right before our son was born and said, let's put this back together, let's do this, I was all in.
Yeah. I think the military, like pre 9/11, no one could foresee 9/11, and then the amount of combat that came after that. I joined in 95, and there was an advert on TV, and there was a guy called Frank. And you see Frank windsurfing, there's a little arrow on Frank. I mean, see Frank skiing. So that's why we joined the army. Now the advert is an arrow in a desert called Frank. That's where Frank is. But,
right.
But the military, obviously, now we know that it takes you away from your family. But back in that sort of period, it offered stability as well. If you were in the military, you knew you were going to be housed. You knew you were going to get paid every 2 weeks, regardless of what recessions are going on. You know what I mean? So it was also a bit of a comfort as well. Did you see that as well as the military at the time?
Yeah,
we did. Yeah, we did. We talked about that. If we, we get married, you get like a few $100s extra a month. Like that's like gold back then, right?
Well, and our kids are the ages we were when I was pregnant, and he was like the same amount of years, months between them is the same amount between us. So at their ages right now, he was a father and I was a mother, and I look at them and I think they are not capable of doing their own laundry.
It's different now. They're like 10 years behind.
Yeah. They've had their heads in a screen for the last 10 years.
For sure.
Yeah.
So did you get onto, we would call it military quarters, but did you get military housing or?
No, actually we ended up renting an apartment right next to the Buds compound in Coronado where Marcus was training. I moved out with the baby. At that time, he was 9 months old. And
yeah,
Marcus,
we were making poor financial decisions right away because that apartment cost $1,000 a month, which back then was obviously extremely pricey for us. But my first paycheck, first 2 weeks was I think $1,042. You said?
I think it was like $1,081. So we had like $81 for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was obviously a good decision.
But we didn't have to have a second car payment because Marcus would walk to work. It was literally just
because Buds at the time, you didn't have to stay on base every night. Like initially, Hell Week, and so I can go downstairs at 4:30 a.m. like with my helmet and like dressed, like walk onto the beach, literally walk down
50 yards.
Yeah, like 100 yards, 300 yards, whatever. Which back then I don't even think there wasn't a guard like separating the civilian beach to the. Now of course there is, and then just start training in the morning.
Wow.
With the class.
And some mornings he was so exhausted that I would get out of bed, get Caden out of bed, put him in the car and drive like from gate to gate. It was just like maybe a 1 minute drive.
Well, I was going to say, Buds is
like,
hard enough as it is, but with a young family and a young baby, that's...
And how old was Caden when the planes hit then?
So he was
a year.
Just over 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was... He's born in May, June, July, August, September. So,
and what obviously, like everybody's got a different story for that moment. But when you saw what happened, what went through your head?
Oh gosh, I was still trying to digest what we had gotten ourselves into with Buds, and all of a sudden, you go from being a college student to a mom and a wife and living. I'd never even left. I'd been on 2 vacations or something my whole life, and I'm living in California. He's in Buds. I was having trouble comprehending the whole totality of my life, but I also really was enjoying it. And I thought, if we can just get through this 6 months, life will be normal. Yeah. Like just get through Buds. That was so dumb. But then 9/11 happened, and
Thanks,
you're
Bin
like,
Laden.
I just remember thinking everything from, I'm sure Marcus is going there right now because he wasn't home. He was training and he was still in Buds. I'm sure they're on a plane there right now they know exactly who did this. They're just going to go in and get him, and then this will be over. Never in a million years would I have thought it would last 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about yourself? Where were you when the towers were hit?
We were literally doing push-ups.
Oh, you're still on Buds.
Phase.
You were on Buds.
We were in third phase. Yeah. Wow. So September. Yeah, we were. 4 weeks? 4 weeks left to graduation.
He graduated Buds October 19th, 2001.
Yeah.
So
were you the first team to pass after?
We were the first class to graduate after the towers came down. Wow. Yeah.
But that must have given you guys a bit of momentum, a bit of drive, wouldn't it? That must have changed.
Yeah, it did.
Changed everyone's mindset on that course.
Completely. Yeah. And the thing was, though, as students, we didn't really understand it yet. We were still like young, dumb students out of college or high school, just trying to get past this thing and run on the beach, But you could see it in the instructors. They were completely different. Yeah. These guys joined in like 95 or 90 or 80, whatever, whenever. Completely different attitude. And you could tell, and they were like, they were angry. Some were like crying, like angry crying. And they just said like, you guys don't understand this. Like we're going to war. Like, and we still didn't get it. We're like, I just want to do push-ups and run on the beach and get through this damn training that's so damn hard. So I don't think we understood the totality of it, but the instructors, Dean, absolutely did.
Yeah, I can imagine the instructors as well is the fact that,
they
want to be back in the team.
Yeah. They were like,
I'm here now for 2 years.
So that was the
all
other
my
thing.
friends are going to go to war. Right. And I had exactly the same.
They're pissed.
I went on a training course, and the unit, we were supposed to go Oman that following week to go on an exercise called Save Sarir. And I'm like, I was on my diving course. I was on my advanced diving course for 10 weeks. I'm like, I'm going to miss the war. It's all going to be over. That's it. 20 years later, be careful what you wish for. But overnight, it just changed everything. Whether you're in the special forces or not, it affected everyone. And I know from a good friend of ours who knew George Bush that Tony Blair, the first phone call that George Bush got was from the UK Prime Minister saying, where do you want us? And so we all knew, although it hit the towers, we knew we were coming with you.
You're
Whatever
in it
happened.
together, yeah.
So,
I like Tony Blair. I could say it on the air.
Of course.
but yeah, I can imagine those instructors as an element of the fear that they're going to be missing out.
That was
Yeah.
it. I do remember that. So fear that anger that they wanted to go, and then fear that they were just, they were stuck in a training position.
So after Bud's training, Marcus went to SEAL qualification training, which is another 6 months after Bud's. And it was the first time that guys who had gotten out actually came back in and then like reharnessed their skill set with, didn't you guys have
we had like 11, somewhere between, I forgot the exact number, but let's just say roughly 12 or 15 guys that had gotten out, and like we're out working in the private sector, bankers, selling vacuum cleaners, like all types of stuff. And then they came back in, and to come back in, you couldn't just go right to a SEAL platoon. They had to go through like basically qualification, advanced training again. So we were with these like older guys that we started learning from and looking up to. And like, why'd you guys come back in? They're like, well, we came in the SEAL teams to go to war. There was nothing going on in the 90s, or mid to late 80s. And now like this is happening. And so they were all just piling back in.
As horrible as that time was, obviously, there was such a sense of patriotism and a uniting and a resolve that I just look at the state of our country today and the state of the world today. And I think back to that time when we were so aligned. It's really sad that we don't have more of that. Like we've gotten through the last 20 years together, and yet we're still so divided.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're yelling at the government all the time for, better veterans benefits and, all this other type of stuff. So it's, it would be nice to get unified again as a nation.
Yeah. That's a whole full conversation.
Probably a whole nother 4 hour
podcast
that we can talk about, right?
Definitely another chapter. But yeah, it is true that these things, I mean, even COVID, I think, was at one point looking to actually bring us all together, and then something else happens and it'll divide us. But so when did you get your first tour then?
Late 2002, 3, early 2003. Deployed for 6 months. And came back in 2004.
Started to work up for deployment in 2005.
And in 2005, got busier. Yeah, so from 2005 to 10, it was just very busy.
We had this baby 2 come.
Oh, yes. She came along at the end of Bud's 2.5 years after Caden was born. And I had her when we arrived in Virginia Beach for his first platoon.
Okay.
So, yeah. So at that point we had 2 kids. I knew I'd always, I don't know. I felt like I'm either having no kids or I'm going to have 3 kids. But I realized really quickly 2 little kids with no help in the middle of a war, that's enough.
Yeah. So you've got his first deployment, you've got the 2 now. And what's happening at this stage? What do you do while he's away?
So because I was from such a sheltered small town, I was very afraid. I was living in a lot of fear at that point because everything felt so uncertain. And like the one protector was not able to protect us. And I don't know, I worked through a lot at that point, a lot of fear, anxiety, crippling panic attacks, couldn't stay home overnight with my kids. It was very tough, but I sort of just white knuckled it and forced myself through it. I went home a lot, but then there came a point where our son he needed to be in a preschool at 4 years old. And I knew that they needed continuity and consistency. And I had to really buckle down and like get through this fear.
And was there any support available to military wives during that period?
I think that was another component of it. When we arrived in Virginia Beach and Marcus was the new guy, he was the only new guy in his platoon. So the other spouses were older than me. And I was already young because, I was 21. So I didn't have a lot in common. The women who did have kids my age were in their 30s. And I had a tougher time making friends in the beginning. I realized pretty early on that there were two kind of spouses in the community. There were those that were like really stoic and held it all together. And then there were those that were really angry and resentful. And I decided very early on that I wanted to be in the stoic crowd. And that probably meant not a lot of socializing with the other spouses because it's a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get together and rank compare and what qualifications does your husband have. There was a lot of that, or there was a lot of like bitching.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation too. That, and I mean, I didn't know this, of course, and I remember Amber saying that there's definitely two different spouses. Ones that were just constantly, smashing their husbands, talking bad about them and complaining, and then the other side that were very supporting of, of what their husband wanted to do, because this was their dream. This is their love. And so, you can complain about it or you can support it. And so I remember having these conversations. So I was happy that Amber chose
I chose to keep one foot in. I didn't go both feet in, and I didn't completely pull away, but I did find a couple of really great girlfriends who supported me, the kids' practices, have an emergency, and then as he shifted commands and we got into more of a specialized group, the spouses were very tight, and everyone was on the exact same level. So there was not a lot of like comparing and stupid games. And those girls were so solid. But I was completely away from my family, and I had no, grandparents, aunts, uncles, none of that.
I'd be really, we can go into it now or we can move on to later, but when the field that you guys are in now, which is obviously helping vets and things, that what you've spoke about there, do you think that's a big impacting factor on how a guy deals with the aftermath of war, that support network, the two separate types of family?
And what I've seen is even now, those spouses who are so stoic are exhausted now. They're exhausted, they're resentful. Not all of them, of course, but it's really, really tough to keep the home fires burning under these circumstances. And I think that there's this expectation that veterans come home and they struggle, and there are a lot of resources and support mechanisms, but there's really not for the spouses.
Yeah, it's more difficult for I can relate to the angry and resentment because, they're married, they've got a family, and then, we're quite selfish in the Special Forces.
We're completely
selfish because we go away and we're doing what we love and we're with our best friends and we're doing that. When we come home, we expect to sort of, come back into normal life and it's hard. And so there is that anger and the resentment, but I do feel for the wives, and they are the unsung heroes because they are literally looking after the kids, keeping the fires burning. But there isn't a support network for them. And the majority of the divorces we have in the military isn't while we're in, it's when we finish our careers, we don't know how to live together.
It's so true.
It's true. It's a mixture. It's definitely a mixture though, because I think we were told, there's always fluctuation somewhere between like 92 and 96% of individuals are divorced.
Oh, the divorce rate in the SEAL community is like
and
above
that's on
90%.
active duty. And then like you said, it definitely, when the individual, retires or separates, there's a lot of it also. So I don't know what those numbers are.
Well, a lot of guys have been married, they're on like their second or third marriage. So that I think that it's looking at the overall divorce, how many guys have a divorce
I think there is the reasons as well. I was lucky to never have to be in any, we would call it a clique back home. There was the little communities of wives who, I was never welcomed into any of them, so that was fine by me.
Aww.
But
I was always conscious of keeping Alana away from that community as well, because I didn't. It was almost like.
Well, I worked as well, so I didn't have the kind of time for the gossip, or I didn't have time for that side of it. But you would often hear about some that maybe it was their ambition to marry into this world. Like that was what they
there are a
always
lot of
wanted to
those
do.
as well.
So it didn't matter who he was. They just wanted to be.
We call them frog hogs.
I was going to say, we call them frog hogs as well.
Sorry, they were frog hogs.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
universal.
if you're listening, you're one of those.
But we used to see it down. In fact, actually, do you remember the time we were in San Diego? I went to, and I was pregnant with Molly at the time, and there was a couple of frog hogs around while I was right there, and they were right in there, and I was like, okay, we're on that game, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm pregnant, but the ones who, the stoic ones, the ones who were strong, the ones who were standing by that side, often it would drive me crazy because there wasn't communication from the other end, from the husband who wasn't seeing all these things that she was maybe going through.
Yeah, I don't think those that left the military and end up divorcing, I don't think they didn't love each other. They just didn't know how to live with each other.
We know plenty of individuals who've survived 20 years of combat and can't survive 2 years as civilians. And we've gone through our own struggles with that.
But do you know, Lana, it's taken a while. I mean, like we're still
a lot of work.
We're still working on it, but like our relationship right now is just, it's never been like this. It's so strong. We're best friends now, and we were never best friends. It was always like
we were enemies and competitors, and we're like fighting each other all the way to the same exact finish line. So at some point,
I mean, I think it was her, but like, I don't know.
I remember someone saying to me once, and I can't actually remember who it was, but they said to me, "Don't let it get to the contempt." You know, like when it gets to the arguments, when it gets to the competitive, and we've been through all those different levels. And I remember like getting to the stage where I was like, I don't like you. and we had to pull back together. And this is going to be a bit of a love fest here, but we're exactly the same. I don't think we've ever been as in love as what we are right now. And it's a really special feeling to know that we went through all those different stages and could have given up at any time. But that's not to say I don't understand why people do give up, because it's a really hard process to do. I grew up in an area in Scotland, one of the smaller cities, but it was an oil and gas capital of Europe. So I was used to the kind of offshore lifestyle. So my granddad, he done sort of 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. So there was always that cycle of when he was away and when he was home, and we would see that. And my father was military, and I always say there's that, you come home, you're super happy, we're great to see you, and you fit into that life, but this is my house and you're in my house now, and we're doing that. Okay, we're all living together, we're happy, but he's going to be going away again soon. So let's start preparing for that desensitization. And then we were at stages where we sometimes wouldn't even talk to each other because we needed to almost dislike each other for this moment to happen. And then he would go away and
it's easier to leave. Wow. It's easier to leave if you're not,
Yeah, Lana, you just saying that. We would talk about that. I said, Amber, what is this? But it was always like a week before or 2 weeks before. It was this weird.
It's like a subconscious.
Relationship that just happened for no reason. I'm like, what's going on here? And it was very much like, almost like cross your arms,
it's
like
a protection mechanism that I don't even think you realize you do, but
self-defense.
That really resonates with me.
You just saying it now, I haven't spoken about it, but I remember it. And I remember going like, well, I don't get it, but it was that trigger, I guess, knowing that I was leaving.
I think for me now, looking back, I wasn't honest with Alana. I didn't want to. I actually was sad leaving, but I never told her that. And for her, she just thought, "Oh, he wants to go." When actually I hadn't really communicated that I didn't really want to go. But whether it was in the military, whether it was doing private security, even when I did the world record bike ride, I was going away for 4 months. And you said you're starting to desensitize. And I had to desensitize from Alana and the kids because I had to get in the right mindset for the job that was ahead. So it's something that's commonplace, but
it's the recognizing it, isn't it? And then the communication of it to know, okay, this is what we're going through. I think if we can talk about those stages, I think that can make us. I think communication is everything and everything that we do anyway. But it makes it a lot easier to do it. So do you guys still go away from each other a lot now, or?
No, we try not to. I mean, we're able to almost do everything together, but there's starting to be a lot on our plate, and we're starting to, I don't want to call it divide and conquer, but for instance, the SOFIC Special Operations kind of vendor event, there's like 10,000 people there. I had work to do in DC. It was like the first time I think in a long time. I was like, you go down there.
Yeah.
'Cause they invited vets. So vets had like a booth.
Oh, cool.
So Amber went down there with the booth with 4 women and 9,996 special operations guys. And I went to DC. So that was like the first time. But other than that, we're doing everything together because a lot of work we can do virtually. Like, for my commercial business, our team is everywhere.
Yeah.
Vets, the team is everywhere. And so we're able to kind of
we
travel
don't
together now.
We
which is
don't like
fun.
Good. Yeah.
So we make them like little vacations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to touch on vets in a minute. So just go back to the SEALs. You were in SEAL Team 10, was it?
Yeah,
And then
when I
6.
started.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because Virginia Beach, I'll get
Yep.
it right. It's all the even numbers are on the
Yes.
Virginia. So you started in 10 and then stayed.
That's
So
right.
you did all your career in
I
Virginia
did everything
Beach.
on the East Coast.
Okay,
I did.
wow.
And then as an instructor, I came to the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you left, you got medically discharged.
Mm-hmm.
Is
In
that-
13. Yeah.
13 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, did you want to leave or you didn't want to leave? Did you know?
I was in a weird place.
Oh, yeah.
Like just mentally, I was like all over the place.
Mm.
And so I could have stayed, I could have gone. I went to OCS for 2 days.
Right.
My commanding officer at the time, that's when I just started having a lot of
Those years were nuts.
just
Those
things
years
going
were
on. And
bananas.
I didn't know what was
When was
forward
the
and
first time
backwards.
you seen it?
So when he went to the command in 2006, I think the tempo really started to pick up. And his deployments were shorter, but they were more frequent. It was like gone 3, home 3, on call 3, gone 3, home 3. So there were some years that he was deployed twice, but on call also, during that time. So our whole life, we were basically ball and chain to Virginia Beach because you couldn't leave a radius. Everything was like about the command and work and deployments. So he started to become more and more detached, but also like to serve at that command. I was 100% supportive of him doing that and very proud of him for doing that. But there were deaths that started happening on every deployment cycle, like multiple deaths, good friends of ours. And
not, obviously not from just my unit, from like all
Yeah.
the because
Yeah.
train
Of course.
together and everybody
Yeah.
goes to
Yeah.
so
but they were getting so dicey that it felt like Russian roulette. And then things started to get a little like very shaky because you just feel like it could be you. He lost one of his best friends in 2008. And I definitely noticed like a shift in him at that point. He really didn't want to be home. He would come home and be completely aloof and disconnected. And so from 2008 to 2010, I started to notice. And I thought if we just leave, if he takes a break from the command and we, have a shore duty and he's home more, then we'll have a chance to put this back together. And that was actually, oh my gosh, so it was such a shift in what we were used to, because not only was he home now every day with no escape, we moved from Virginia Beach to San Diego so he could take a shore duty and be a BUDS instructor. So we completely shifted, everything that had insulated us, which I had become fine. Like the panic attacks were gone. The friend situation had shifted. I had a very, very great group of girlfriends in Virginia Beach. So our life was basically turned upside down when he tried to come home. And there were 2 instances that prompted us to first want to go back to Virginia Beach and the command, and then just get out completely. The first one, of course, was the killing of Osama bin Laden. Yeah. And that was like this big, we've got to get back there. We're missing out on, all these things. And then the helicopter crash just a few months later that killed, 30 individuals. Yeah. And that was like, oh gosh, well, that's what we'd be going back to, the same insanity. Mm-hmm. So he decided to get out.
Yeah, I was just confused at that time. The commanding officer just came to me and said, hey, you should go to OCS. And I didn't even think about it. And I said, yeah, sure. Well, again, without even thinking much about it. And I kind of got pushed to the front of the line and I literally went for, I think it was 2 days. and I was like sitting on the floor folding my underwear, like reading the.
But he had just gotten home from
11
Afghanistan the week
the week
before.
before.
This was
you know.
a horrible idea in hindsight.
And I remember like tossing a book across the room and just saying like, "Hey, who's in charge here?" I was like, "Can we have a conversation?" I'm like, "Yeah, there's no way I should be here right now."
Yeah.
And so I went right back. I was like, what are you doing back? And I just said, I need a break right now.
Yeah.
And so that's when I went out to the West Coast to be an instructor.
Yeah, I only ask if it's something you wanted or whether you're forced out the door. Or...
No, I mean, no, I wasn't forced out of anything. I mean, I miss the heck out of it now. Yeah.
But I did 16 years and I injured. I didn't want to leave, and so I was forced. That's where my question was.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously there are plenty of guys that are forced, and then others give an option. You know, but we were not in a good place, and I didn't know the kids at the time, and. You know,
did you recognize there was there was things?
That was my question.
Sorry.
No, I was going to.
Yeah, I started reaching out for help. So I started going to psychologists, and I didn't even know the term therapist, but psychologists initially. I think 2008, 9, 10, went to the first brain clinic in 2011 while I was still on active duty. I was put on antidepressants while on active in 2010. So, and then I stayed on them for 7 years straight, multiple different.
And they gave you antidepressants while you were still active, did they?
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
Of course they do. They need them out there.
Yeah, you gotta get that stuff going.
Yeah.
Come on. Unfortunately. The biggest buyer of meds, right?
Yeah. And and interesting, we were talking about earlier about the wives that are stoic and those that know. I see guys, and when they leave the military, some guys' transitions can be quite smooth and some can be quite turbulent. The ones that are smooth are the ones that have that support network around you, and the ones that's turbulent is probably the non-stoic group.
There's been a lot of guys that I don't say forced to stay in, but have been forced to stay in. Talking to some senior leadership to say, what you're obviously completely messed up.
Yeah.
Where do you think, what kind of safety net do you think you're going to be able to, run into if you do leave? And so there's individuals that are just like, screw this, I'm done. They obviously have like serious, PTS or PTSD or whatever you want to call it, or depression or traumatic brain injury. And they just don't see it, but everybody else does. And they're like, I'm out of here. And finally you either get somebody who has their head on their shoulder to say, are you sure? Because what are you going to?
It's not any better out there.
What do you think you're going to find out there?
Yeah,
and the individual is usually like, doesn't matter. Yeah. Because you're just like, I just want to run. I want to run away as fast as I can. Wow. And so and I've talked to many guys that have been quote unquote saved by that individual. They was like, thank God I stayed in because they found out I had like hemorrhage on my brain, or I did have some serious stuff going on. They took care of me. If I went out, I'd maybe be in the bottle and you'd find me on the side of a road.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of that goes on.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so at this time, was PTS being spoke about? Were people recognizing this was happening?
It was just starting, I think, to be seriously talked about in 2010, because I went to go see psychiatrist on the West Coast, active duty, who said, Marcus, you're like the 200th person that's come to me about the same exact thing. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. He's flat out said it. He goes, I don't know what's going on. You're all talking about the same things. You're all dealing with the exact same things. You're all struggling with the exact same things. So this is still like it wasn't being talked about. Just individuals just going, hey, they're like, I'm not doing well. I know what this is.
But there's also like a big stigma in
he's the one who put
saying
me on
that.
antidepressants.
I mean, from my dad was the Northern Ireland era, so the IRA, they were the terrorists at the time, and when we ever tried to speak about anything to do with PTSD or anything, it was like that. Oh, that's bullshit. They just need to. And so many of those guys, 100%, were going through it. They'd seen and they'd done and what they'd gone through, but it was almost something you just didn't want to be admitting to as a guy, that there was anything wrong with your.
Well, I was guilty of it as well when I was still in. I remember reading an article in a newspaper, and it was 3,000 very early stages back in 2010 again. there was 3,000 cases of post-traumatic stress in the British military, but 95% of them were non-active. They're like on a ship out in the middle of nowhere or on an Air Force base. And I said, it's just, they just want an insurance claim. And that was and now years later, having done a lot in the mental health environment, I understand it affects all people in different ways. But that was my mindset. And I was like, nah, it can't be true. And then I started seeing my friends.
Ours
then,
too.
Yeah.
No, we had this. I mean, we had the same mindset. I still even struggle with it. Like I want to say I won't joke about the term, obviously, but I think our perception of it is what we've learned on TV, which is PTSD. There has to be a car has to backfire, and you have to hit the deck and roll under behind coverage. Like that is PTSD. If it's outside of that, it's not. I think we know. That's not the case. Not the case. That's obviously a very, very, very intense version of PTSD that people have for sure. But there's a sliding scale too, right?
Yeah, no, there is. And I was seeing it like some of my friends would get it and then you'd be like, well, I was on that tour or that operation with him. How did I not?
I didn't get it.
But people see it from different sets of eyes. I might be on one side of the compound, he may be on the other side. There's so many things. But I've noticed it since leaving the military, is the fact that it is now being addressed.
Well, I think we found in the UK, definitely the studies that we've been involved or helped with, is so much of it's come from not even the military. It's way before.
75% of vets this is a UK study, 75% of military vets with post-traumatic stress has got nothing to do with their time in the military. It's their childhood.
I would 100% agree with that.
It's just a trigger of something in the military. And so I know back in the UK, is there adults, it's not too late. You can help them, but you can't reverse, life. But if we can stop, help the children, then it sort of breaks that
I think
trend.
Understanding the effects of trauma and understand it from whatever angle it is. There'll be many who'll say that you have to have been in the military to suffer. Like you have to, and all these things are coming out from childhood years that we don't even realize is causing.
Yeah, we have the same. I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm going to be willing that it's probably similar.
Yeah,
that childhood stuff is
that's what we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot through
at vets. And we know whether that fuels someone to be in the military, or there's something different about you guys. There's something that there's some level of resiliency that was born somewhere.
Yeah.
And
so it's a good thing too. Right?
Yeah, it's good to a point. And then at what point there's a coach that we work with that has this analogy, and he takes a bunch of SEALs and puts them in this competition with a bucket of ice. And they all think that the person who pulls their hand out last is the winner.
Yeah.
But the person who pulls their hand out right when it starts to become a detriment to themselves and the team is the real winner, because, that resiliency can take you too far. What happens if you're frostbitten and you lose your hand? Then you're no good to yourself or the team.
Failed that test,
which we've had,
right?
100%, right? And we've had
a quick story
with
on that.
black fingers.
Like I won, great. Pull the trigger. I can't because my fingers are black.
Back to the competition thing. We, me and Dean were doing the cold plunging recently. That great. Dean went in 3 minutes. I went and I think I done 8 minutes on the first. And so Dean was like, well,
on separate occasions. So I went in the first time and they're like, 3 minutes is the average. So I went and did 3 minutes. And then I was away and Alana had gone and done 8 minutes and it was on social media. I was like, oh, she's beating me. And so as soon as we came back, we went in together.
But we both said, right, let's go in. And then Dean was like, but we break at 11. And I was like, well, we'll break whenever we're ready. So let's just go in and just do it. And it got, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it's going up. And I'm like, he's not going out. He's not. And he's like, we'll come out together. I was like, right, okay. So I've got this on video. You can see us both coming out at 13 and a half. And as I'm coming out, you can see he keeps 1 foot in until I'm fully out. And then as we get out, I can see him just in full shaking mode. So I was like, I had to get him into the sauna, and I was like, you've kind of hit the hypothermia stage almost. He says, yeah, I did about 8 minutes. And I said, so why didn't you get 100%. Out?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I can't have you stay
Yeah,
So I
longer
would
than me.
have massively failed that test.
Yeah.
My hand is still being there now.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's falling off.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the point to that is that trauma can fuel you to a point, but at what point does it turn on you and then
Yeah.
it becomes a Greek tragedy?
Yeah.
What makes you strong is also your demise.
Mhm.
And so the work that we're doing now at Vets is basically allowing people to go all the way back to the root cause of trauma. And I would say same numbers are higher, 75% or higher.
Yeah.
It's childhood.
Yeah.
So when you compound childhood trauma with war trauma, with repeated head trauma from subconcussive blows, concussions, or blasts, and then you add in transition trauma, the relational trauma, the loss of purpose, passion, paycheck, community, identity. Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
a pretty complex.
Yeah, well, I know
Mix.
that was my big one when I got out, was that identity crisis.
Yeah.
You know, I got to where I had in the SBS because of my physical robustness, and now I couldn't even run 100 meters without my knee giving way. And then, you know, having worked in, knowing what I was doing day in, day out for the next 2 years, we're very similar to you. If we weren't on operations, we're on the pages. Yeah, but knowing what I was going to do, so now where do I fit in society? What is my role? What is my purpose? So I can relate definitely to the identity crisis. So Vets, I want to learn more about Vets. Did you start Vets because you realized that the help?
Well, I think what was the treatment that helped you?
what was the original
from
treatment?
Well,
Yeah.
From-
So I'll start.
you want to
So-
go back to 2013 when you were medically retired, and then
Yeah, that'd be good.
2017 in that 4-year span.
Yeah. So I got out of the military. We moved up to LA from San Diego, and I thought, hopefully life would be better.
He wanted nothing to do with the military. Never wanted to pick up a weapon again.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to have anything to do with anyone. Kind of like run away as far as you can, as fast as you can. And I'd say from that day forward, everything just started like literally going, downhill. I mean, I worked in an area of individuals that I just was not, clicking with initially.
What did you go into? What was your
Private banking
okay?
on a
In
very,
Beverly
very
Hills.
powerful, strong team
Oh wow.
in Beverly Hills, and
Total 180.
Finished grad school, and it was quite a shock.
And why was that? Was that because I can relate to this? Is that when I got out, I was like, I don't like civilians.
Yeah,
Civilians don't have the same work ethic as me. They don't think like me. Was it an element of that you felt that they weren't?
I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit of everything too, because I was also used to hanging out with individuals like us
Yes.
here, and always had your back. That never talked about money. That never, I just now experienced the complete, literally like the 180, right? With all they talked about was money. Couldn't look you in the eye when they were talking to you. Always looking over your shoulder for the next best thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that was very difficult to, because I was never like that growing up. I grew up with like very middle class, blue collar family that never had money, but we had enough. We always got by, but you never heard about, earning a dollar for your living. It was always, we always rented. And so the landlord was always the bad guy. Anybody who drove a nice car was a bad. So that's how I grew up. And so this was a shock for me. So that part was just really tough. So now here professionally was whatever. Still gone a lot, right? You're gone all day long. So that started it. So then we moved back to,
we moved to Texas.
We moved from there to Texas. And again, I just did not fit in with individuals that, we lived around. And not like these people were bad by any means. It was all self-driven. But then started drinking hard because what else is there to do? Like, let's start numbing from, all the stuff that I'm going through. Like, and then, started getting angry, started getting really upset and depressed. So like I would start having outbreaks of just like, like crying bouts it could be Starbucks. It can be at a football game, hearing the national anthem, and so like, I felt like all this stuff was happening at one time. And then, from Amber's perspective, I was completely spiraling out of control. But I mean, I was getting physical with people for like just not
Breaking their
right
heart.
reasons.
Beeping out.
Just, it just all. And so at that point, I was still talking to different psychologists and therapists, no continuity of care. So I can't even tell you how many. I'd go from one to the other.
A load of prescriptions.
The prescriptions were the same thing. So the prescriptions were like one prescription, and then that didn't work. So they would like increase your milligrams, and that didn't work. Or maybe you get headaches because of it, or maybe the headaches were from other reasons. So you'd get medication for that. And then I couldn't focus. So then I started getting, taking other stuff like Nuvigil and Provigil and maybe some Adderall, and then couldn't sleep. So the Ambien thing was a nightmare. Ambien thing was just a nightmare on active duty. Those things were like candy handed out. Yeah.